What's up, Wargamers? Welcome back to World of Wargaming. I'm Isaiah. Yet again today I would like to invite you to pull up a chair, grab a tasty beverage, a munchy crunchy snack, and let me talk at you for a minute. And the thing that I would like to talk at you about today is Rangers of Shadow Deep. Now, normally I talk about the rule book, then start playing the game. However, there are a few games that I really love that are from the very beginning of the channel where I wasn't doing that segment yet. So for the next couple of weeks, maybe coming back after Christmas, after vacation, I'm going to be talking about some of those, going through some of those rule books, talking about some of those games, just to put the content out there, to make people aware of it in case, they see a back rep or something, they want to have a little bit better understanding of the game and its purpose and its mechanics and everything else. So today we're talking about, again, one of my favorite games. I've played a lot of this, and I still have so much left of it to play, which is one of the things I love about it. Rangers of Shadow Deep by Joseph McCullough. Now, first impressions, and I still remember it from when I opened this book, because when I ordered this is the deluxe edition. The green one is the deluxe edition. I didn't realize that it was like this faux leather. I mean, I can get that up close. You can kind of see some of that texture. And it's like embossed all over the front. So when I opened the box and saw it, because I thought it was just going to be like, a hardcover book, which it is a hardcover book, but I thought it was going to be like a normal hardcover book. And I opened it and saw that, and I was like, I like that so much. And then when you open the book, it has one of the most, for me, iconic pieces of imagery. Like, I can't think of the game without thinking of this piece of artwork, because it really does sum up everything that I expected the game to be after hearing about it and looking into it, and B, after playing it, everything that I expected it to be. And it's this piece of artwork right here. Look at this. Look at this, just Ranger with his back to you, crows flying, toting the head of an orc or something, man. Like, that's quintessential. Quintessential. When you think of the word Ranger, this is the picture you think of. If you're talking about fantasy, not hockey. And in going through the rest of the book, the majority of the artwork actually all the artwork is black and white, and it sticks to this kind of very little Nautilus spiral. Very kind of stark imagery, which I like. Let's jump back here to this section real quick. I have it tabbed. Stuff like this. Like, just very cool kind of. It looks like ink wash. I don't know if it's digital. It's probably digital, but it's got a very ink wash kind of style to it, which I enjoy. Look at this beautiful piece of work right there. Yeah, just good art, nice. The black and white nature and the kind of starkness of the art does set an overall tone for the book, and for the game, which is a very kind of gloomy, encroaching evil kind of vibe. Moving forward from that, our first section is your Maker Ranger section, which is pretty straightforward. You get so many stat points that you can assign. You have a base stat line, and then there's so many points that you can add to improve to those stats. And then you get some abilities. I think you get 5 chosen between heroic abilities and spells. With the heroic abilities and the spells, one thing to be aware of when you're choosing them is that they are all once per game. There might be some that are passive that I've not used or not seen, but the majority of them are once per game. You get to do this thing, and then it recharges between the scenarios. And some of them, for if you want to go, this is how you really determine your build, whether or not you want to go into a melee build or a ranged build or a magic build or some hybrid of the two. You then get to choose some basic equipment, how he's going to be outfitted, bow, sword and board, staff, whatever. You don't have to pay anything for that, you just get it. And then you get your recruitment points. You get 100 recruitment points, and those are for gathering up the companions that are going to join you on this solo journey of trying to fend back the evil encroaching, which is the Shadow Deep. Jump around in the book a little bit here, but this is the companion section, and there are a fair number of these. They have a points cost. You just add that up to 100. There are certain things there's some things that you can do to raise your recruitment points above 100. For example, you can, in lieu of one of your feat upgrades, I want to say, you can get an extra 10 recruitment points, and you also get extra recruitment points for every point you have sunk into leadership, which is one of the skills that you can give. The sheet looks very, very much like a D&D character sheet. You have your stats, and then you have your skills, and you roll D20s for everything, which is something that I both like and dislike sometimes. We're going to talk about that more when we get to the actual mechanics of the game part of the story. But lots of companions to choose from to figure out how to flesh your party out. And they range in points. The weaker ones cost less. The more expensive, cool ones are more expensive. And there are also extra companions that are in some of the supplements, which will be a separate video where I'll talk through what's in the supplement books and what that looks like. From there, we move, and you choose your companions, assemble your party, and then venture out along the story arc mission scenarios of your choosing. So while I'm on story arc, the game plays very much like a D&D module, like a D&D campaign. Joe has written out scenarios that, for the first few at least, you're supposed to follow them in the order that he presents them. I did not quite do that. I deviated because I have side quest syndrome. Like when you play a game and you got like 200 hours in the game, but you're only like 10% through the main storyline. That's me with everything I do in life, because I got side quest syndrome. But he's written out these out, and there are lots of them. There in the deluxe book, there are 4 missions, and each mission will have anywhere from 3 to 4 or 5 scenarios. And then there's an extra supplement, which is the Burning Light supplement, which is a whole over like 9 or 10 scenarios, that's where I'm currently playing at through at the time of this video, as I'm working my way through the Burning Light campaign. And then in the Facebook group, there are tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of fan-written scenarios, and a lot of them are very, very good. I did a podcast with my buddy Matt over at Oathwire a while back, and that was one of the things that we talked about is just how fun it is, and like Joe totally supports it. The author's totally cool with it. He actually provided like a cover sheet template that says like Heroes Adventure League content or something like that, so that you can designate something very easily as fan-made content or official content. And it's all fun. It's all good. I've enjoyed every single one of them I've played. Some of them have been very difficult and troublesome. Some of them have been kind of breezy. Joe also presents challenge level in the game, which is something where I'm at a point where I think I'm over leveled for where I'm at in the main storyline. So I'm most likely going to start playing the challenge modes very, very soon, because I want a little bit more anxiety over the game. You want that feeling of oh my God, am I going to get out of here? That's a good feeling to have when you're playing a game, especially when you're playing a solo game, because you don't have an opponent to help entertain you. It's all on you to maintain the immersion and the enjoyment that you get from the experience, which is part of why I like it, because I'm a fairly independent person. Moving on, we come to the actual gameplay mechanics. So the turn is split into phases. Usually your scenario will tell you how many turns you are going to play, and it ranges from anywhere from 6 or 7 up to 12 or 14. It's dependent totally on the scenario, but in every scenario your turn structure stays the same. You have the ranger phase, the creature phase, the companion phase, and then the end phase. In the ranger phase, you can activate your ranger, and if you're playing solo, you can activate 2 of your companions. Now, in older editions of these rules, Joe used the same mechanic that he used in Frostgrave as well as Stargrave, which is that those companions that you activate within the ranger phase had to be within 3 inches of your ranger. However, that was later fact out of the game. It's a conversation that I've had with many, many people online because of, and like I thought that I was crazy, because I'd have to go back and check. I was like, no, this is definitely what the rule book says. And it's because in the original edition of the game, which is the book that many people have, many people bought the game, when it came out, and they just never upgraded it or checked the facts. I'm guilty of that too. I'm one of the worst for checking facts. That's why I'm so grateful when people from the community and the audience help me out with those things, because I'm terrible at keeping up with facts. But that's no longer a thing. So it can be your ranger and any 2 companions. It then goes to the creature phase, where all the monsters and stuff on the board will activate, and they follow a very, very simple and elegant AI. And I like the AIs in all of Joe's games. They're very, very good, solid, simple AIs, but they're also good for the entry. Like, compared to the AI for, say, Chromehammer Ascension from Nordic Weasel and Jason Smith, that AI is much more intricate. It's a more intricate flowchart. However, that AI is also very, very satisfying to play. It feels very, very good. And this one can have the same feeling, as long as sometimes you have to break away from the AI a little bit to make a decision or a choice that you think is more fitting for what the monster would do. Because, and sometimes not, but I enjoy it. I love that the AI has a random movement mechanic, because I love random movements in games for AI, for mobs and monsters and stuff. I just love it because it feels very just, oh, we're patrolling around the neighborhood, seeing what's up until we know that there's something worth looking into. When your ranger or one of your companions activates, you get 2 things that you can do. You can move, and then you can do an action, which would be shoot, swing, whatever. You can also sprint. So in this game, when you do that, you just get half of your movement. I normally round up. I'm not exactly sure. I may be supposed to be right now, but in my head, I think I round up normally. Or you may be supposed to keep the fractal. Not sure. Anyways, you can move and then move half your movement. Again, if you really want to get somewhere, you can move and shoot. Or you can shoot, then move. You don't necessarily have to move and do them in any specific order, because if you do move and shoot, there is a penalty for moving and taking the shot, for having a hasty shot. With your heroic, your spells count as an action. However, your heroic abilities, things like adding a modifier to your shot or your swing, things like that, those can be done in between actions. They don't cost you an action to activate those or to use those. You just declare that you're doing it and then do it. When you move, if you move within an inch of an enemy, that enemy will automatically snap to combat, which means it allows enemies to actually kind of guard narrow passageways and stuff like that without you just skirting and just walking straight past them. When an enemy moves to you, if it gets to within an inch, you can choose whether or not you want to force combat. Now, if you choose not to force combat so that it cannot swing at you, as soon as you move that model, you count as moving within an inch of the monster, and it will snap to attack you. But you can do it that way to delay it a little bit, or to potentially get some more support into that situation before something bad happens, before it just comes out and solo whacks somebody that you don't want to be getting whacked. There is potential for things like falling damage. You've got rough ground, which cuts your movement in half. Moving into combat is what charging is referred to. If you move and you make it into that either base to base or within an inch to where they snap and force combat, then you get a free attack, and as soon as you do your attack, your turn is ended. If you start in base to base, all you can do is fight. You can't move. There's no mechanic for like disengaging or anything like that. You gotta fight it out until it's done. With the exception that if you win that combat, you can choose to either stay locked, or you can choose to step away or to push them away an inch. And that would not trigger another snap to attack when you move, unless you move straight back into them. Swimming is probably the most terrifying way to get around the board in this game, because there are some modifiers. You only need a 5 on a d20, but there's modifiers like you get -2 to your roll for light armor, -5 for heavy armor, -1 if you're carrying a shield, -2 if you're carrying treasure, and all these things stack. And then if you fail, you take damage by however much you've botched the roll. By however much you failed the roll, you take that much damage. And it can, I've definitely had, I lost a party member, spoiler alert, but I lost a member of my party who had been with me since the very beginning to drowning. It is absolutely terrifying to be caught in deep water in this game, and I highly recommend that you avoid it whenever possible. So which brings us to the actual rolling of the dice. So whenever you perform a skill check or a stat check, you roll your d20, you add the appropriate stat, and then you check it against a target number. It's very, very basic. However, when you get into combat, things get a little bit dicier. And the reason for that is that in combat in this game, whenever you swing at something, you have the potential to hit or be hit. Whoever wins the roll gets to deal the damage, if I'm not mistaken. I know in melee, not in shooting, that works a little bit different, but in melee, you have the chance to hit or be hit. So when you go into a melee, you roll the 2 d20s, add appropriate modifiers for your fight skill or anything like that, and then compare the results. Whoever has the higher result has won the combat. Then you take that number and compare it against their armor. Subtract their armor from it, and whatever is remaining is damage dealt. If there's nothing remaining, then no damage was dealt. However, you would still count as winning the combat, so you could still choose to step away, push away, or stay engaged. Then you get into situations of having multiple participants in a combat. So for every friendly model or enemy model that exceeds the opposition, you get +2 to the roll. So for example, if there is one zombie and there are 2 of my companions and one of my companions is fighting, the other one that's in there would give this guy +2 to his roll. If there were 2 friends on each side, these would cancel each other. These would cancel each other out, and then it would just be a straight roll. If there were 3 on the bad guy side and 2 on my side, 1 of each would cancel each other out, and then the bad guys would get +2. They would get the +2 bonus. In Rangers, there is no cap to it. However, in Stargrave, Frostgrave, it caps out at 10. But in Rangers, as far as I've read, there is no cap to how much support you can have at one time. When you shoot, it's very similar, but not quite the same. The shooter rolls their d20 as their shoot stat and any modifiers. The shootee, the target, rolls their d20 and their fight stat. And then if the shooter's die roll is higher than the target's, it hits and you go through the same stats for damage. Subtract the armor, remainder is damage. And if the target wins the dice roll, then just nothing happens. The shot goes wide, misses, whatever. And then there are modifiers, and I have done these modifiers wrong so many times because it just, in my head, it seems like it should be the other way. But the modifiers apply to the target, not to the shooter. So if there's intervening terrain, it gets +1, and that stacks up to +3, I think. If they're in light cover, they get +2. If they're in heavy cover, they get +4. If it's a hurry shot, which means if you moved before shooting, then they get +1. And that's the one that I mess up the most, because I always do it as a -1 to myself as opposed to a +1 to them, which I guess is probably the same thing. I'm not a mathematician. I'm an artist and a wargamer. But it's just, as written, it's supposed to be a modifier to the target shot, to the target's roll, not a negative modifier to the shooter's roll. And then -2 to -2 to their roll if they are a large target. There are some other modifiers, and not as far as shooting, but some other status effects that can occur throughout the course of the game. So you have poison, which cuts you to 1 action, I believe. Is that right? Yes, they receive a maximum of 1 action. There is disease, which disease and poison usually come from an enemy that has that trait doing damage to you. Hunger and thirst happen because the scenario tells you that they happen. And then we go to, which we've already talked about. Treasure tokens are things that you pick up around the board. Potential loots, good things. Gold doesn't really matter in this game because gold just ends up going back to the treasury. But you can swap gold if that's what you end up getting. And there's a little handy dandy charts for rolling on the different loots. There's one for weapons, one for herbs and potions, one for, let's see, weapons, armor, herbs and potions, and then magic items. Yes, and then a magic item table. Post game for the game is pretty straightforward. Everybody who survives, everybody gets a point of experience. Everybody survives who gets 2. Okay, I got this now. Your ranger gets actual XP. Your companions get progression points. They get 1 for showing up, or they get 2 if they survive, if they're not reduced to 0, not knocked out. If they get knocked out but survive their injury roll, they get 1. Because if they're dead, they don't get XP. And when you are reduced to 0 health points, there are some charts. First, you have to check to see if you're dead, have a permanent injury. If you're badly wounded, you have a close call or a full recovery. And there are things like you can get a smashed leg, a crushed arm. You can get psychological scars, which is what one of my companions currently has. You can lose an eye. Just cool little narrative things that actually give you a modifier where they have an effect in the game, which I think is very, very, very cool. Your rangers levels are they cost more the higher level you get. So like from 1 to 5, it costs 100 XP. From 6 to 10, it costs 150 XP. So it gets a little bit harder to XP. You have to do a little bit more, fight a little bit more to get where you want to be. In some of the starter scenarios, you just get kind of a set amount of XP for doing things. In Burning Light and some of the later scenarios, campaigns, I think it's more based on what you kill is where the bulk of your XP comes from. And then your companions, when they progress, it is on a chart. So when they get 10, it's on 10. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. They get a different ability. And they can eventually unlock some, heroic abilities and stuff like that. But you get your first heroic ability at 50, which means that they would have had to have played in and survived 25 scenarios. Which is possible. It's definitely possible. I think I've got companions, some of mine that are starting to push close to 30 progression points. Like ones that have been with me since the very, very... Now, I've definitely lost some. I've definitely lost some friends along the way. But the friends that have stuck it out are getting to a point where they are pretty beastly, which is a really cool feeling, really cool to see them progress. That's the joy of an RPG game, is getting to see these characters that you're invested in get better over time. And to get you get to do that on the table and by yourself, you don't have to worry about finding an opponent. Now it is co-op. You can, if you have a friend over there, there's no head-to-head mode, but there is you can play co-op. And that's kind of fun, with just kind of have some friends over, have a few drinks, grill something, and just kind of play through some scenarios on the table with a group until everybody's ready to go home. It's especially easy, like if in my situation, like where I've already played a lot of the early scenarios, so I already have all the terrain and everything else you need for that. So we can just go seamlessly from one into the next, to the next, to the next. It's a great way to introduce people to co-op gaming. Games like this are, in my opinion, are also a great way to get a significant other or a partner into gaming with you, because one of the problems with that is that there's a competitiveness there, and there's a little bit of you don't want to be clubbing seals, but it's harder sometimes to get people to do that. But something where it's like, hey, let's work together against this shared enemy, that's a lot easier to get people into rolling dice with you sometimes, especially if they're people who don't normally roll dice, but maybe they like board games or stuff like that. It's an easier way to get them into the hobby and get to them to doing that thing that you love with you. After that, we come into the first 3 missions, which are what are they called? Mission 1 is called The Missing, where you're looking for a lost ranger. Mission 2 is the Beacon Tower, which is one of my favorites. I really, 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 really enjoyed that mission. The bridge scenario in that is probably one of my favorite scenarios in this entire world, not in the whole world like Earth world, but in the world of Rangers of Shadow Deep. That's probably one of my favorite scenarios. And then you go into Descent into Darkness, which is the last scenario, and that one is a doozy. And if you choose to be super extra with the first scenario, it can be a lot of fun. It can also be a pain in the keister, but you don't have to be extra like I was and like many, many other people are. And then after those 3, you have your Bestiary, and there are some Bestiary cards that you can purchase. They're not very expensive. I want to say less than $20. That have just cards with all of the monsters on them. They also have some blank cards where if you wanted to, you could like fill out your character stats or your companion stats or whatever, just so you have a very quick, it's just a good quality of life bookkeeping kind of thing. And as we all probably know by now, I'm a sucker for quality of life elements in a game. After that, we come to the Burning Light scenario, which is a 9 or 10 mission scenario where you are raiding through a convent looking for the decanter of Saint Amelia, which is a holy relic artifact kind of thing. So you're being a little bit of an Indiana Jones, and it's pretty in-depth. It's got a very, very cool clue system to it, or note system to it, where every once in a while you get a chance to uncover something in the monastery, and if you pass your roll or whatever it is that you got to do for it, it gives you a reference number in the back of the book, and then sometimes you get a helpful piece of information, sometimes you don't. I have yet to get a helpful piece of information from one of them, which I feel is going to make finishing this successfully very, very difficult for me, because every time I've had a roll for like something that I really think is going to give me some good information, I don't pass a roll. And of course I'm not going to go look at the note, because I don't want to. That's cheating. I don't want to, even though you're playing by yourself, I don't want to kill the fun for myself. And then we come to character sheets. An index, which I've mentioned before, is always a plus for me. Now, one thing that we do not have here is a proper quick reference. And then we're back to this amazing piece of art that I love so much. We don't have a quick reference. Now, albeit, the mechanics are very, very simple. There's not a lot of like gotcha, minutia, itty bitty, nitpicky, silly billy, whatever rules in this game. It's very, very straightforward. It's mainly just learn the dice mechanics and you've got the game down. So while it's not necessary in this game, perhaps, I always like having them. They just make me happy. That's a thing that I enjoy. But, I mean, that's potentially my only gripe about this game. The D20 system is very swingy. When you hit big, you really hit big. When you hit bad, you really hit bad. And it hurts. Like, you can have some little piddly old rat or something like accidentally one-shot you. And so I forgot to mention this earlier. A nat 20 in this game, just like in D&D, crit. You get 5 extra damage. You automatically hit. It's generally a lights out unless you're fighting a boss of some kind. It's pretty much lights out. If you manage to get a crit, you're probably killing whatever you shot at. And it does feel very, very, very good to hit that nat 20. But when your dice are cold and you're just getting like beaten to death by pissant little mobs that you should just be able to step on and squish, it can be very, very frustrating. And that happens more so for sure at the lower levels of the game than it does at higher levels. At the point where I'm at right now, I feel like I'm almost on God mode. Like my modifiers are so good, especially on my Ranger Dundrick, that I just blink, blink. I'm like Legolas, man. Just capping people from across the board like it's nobody's business. And it feels awesome. I love it. But I had to struggle through some really, really tough situations earlier, and that's part of the reason probably that I enjoy it so much now, is because I came from nothing, from the bottom, from the lowest ranks of the Rangers, which are still an elite unit, but I was at the bottom. That's why I got sent on these little chores. But now I'm stepping up, and the kingdom is starting to recognize that I'm that guy, and I'm going to continue to be that guy. And if my Ranger ever dies, I'm going to have one of my companions. I'm just going to upgrade him to a Ranger and give him a Ranger sheet and then continue on with the campaign. Speaking of continuing on the campaigns, there are lots of supplements. I have one of the appendix or anthologies. I don't know if that's the right word. Whatever the word is, it's a collection of like 4 or 5 different scenarios. Some of them are very short. Some of them are kind of long. Some of them are one-shots. But it's very cool. And you can also purchase them individually. They range from like $4 or $5 up to like $15, depending on whether you get the PDF or the print-on-demand copy. I personally want the print-on-demand copy. Like, I want the hard copy of the game. It's just how I am. I like having my rule books. I like touching them, sorting them, reading them, smelling them. I just like them. They make me happy. So I keep buying them. And then you can go through there. So once you get through the core book stuff, once you finally play through that, there's lots and lots of more of content. Like I mentioned earlier, there's also tons and tons of missions in the Facebook group. So in my opinion, if you hadn't guessed already, like I think Rangers is a phenomenal game. I love it. I'm gonna keep playing it. My goal is to eventually play and film and record all of the content. All of the official content, not necessarily all of the content, but all of the official content. And I've worked my way through most of these. Like I'm to the last of these. I'm into the Burning Light, but I've also played several of the other scenarios from the supplement that I bought, plus several fan scenarios, and I just love the game. I love it. I've got Stargrave, and I'm working. I've got the models printed. I'm working on getting that painted up and getting that fired up too, because of the Hope Eternal supplement that came out not too long ago. That's a full-fledged, honest to God solo campaign. But that'll be a topic for another video. For today, I think I'm done talking at you. I appreciate you sitting back, hanging out, listening while we talked about some Rangers of Shadow Deep. If you haven't played this game, I cannot recommend it highly enough, especially if you have a large fantasy collection of models and terrain and a wide collection, or if you're just looking for an excuse to buy some of those cool Whiz Kid models and Reaper's Bones models that are sitting on the shelf at your local gaming store that you keep thinking to yourself, man, that's a cool freaking model, but what am I going to do with it? Well, there's the answer, friend. Rangers of Shadow Deep. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you have an absolutely amazing rest of your day. And as always, I'd like to say a big, huge, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to our patrons who support us and pledge to us over on Patreon. You guys are the absolute best. If you enjoyed the content you saw here today and that's something that you would like to consider doing to help out the channel, go over there, check out the link in the description, check out the Patreon. There's a lot of cool stuff over there, including access to our Discord server, talk to me, hang out with me, talk about our work, what we got going on in the hobby, some shout outs, all kinds of cool stuff. Check it out if that's something that you think you would be into. And regardless of whether or not you do that, I want you to know that I am incredibly grateful that you decided to stop by and spend part of your day with me today, rolling dice and pushing toy soldiers around. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And as always, may the dice be ever in your